So in last week's video, which I definitely did not film at the same time as this video, I'm definitely not wearing the same exact like Tiki Room shirt and earrings as last week. I did a speed paint of Jose, the main host of the Enchanted Tiki Room, as well as the Barker bird who used to be outside of the Enchanted Tiki Room guiding people in. They removed him because he caused a traffic jam of people gawking at him on their way into the Tiki Room. And also art of one of the cockatoo choir girls, one of the birds that lowers from the ceiling and sings. So this week I wanted to do the other hosts because I'm like, how can I draw Jose and then not draw the other hosts of the show, which are Pierre, Michael, and Fritz. I'm going to do speed paints of those three. So I guess here's the speed paint of those. So first up we have the German host, Fritz, who is voiced by Thurl Ravenscroft, who not only has like the coolest name of all time, but he did the voice of Tony the Tiger, and he also sang You're a Mean One, Mr. Grinch, so pretty notable voice actor. So I wanted to do a very kind of loud, booming voice pose for him, so I kind of came up with the body shape. I wanted it to be a little different from Jose, because I don't want them to all look just like recolors of Jose. And I gave him kind of this pose that makes him look like, in my mind, like he's giving his loud input on a conversation, like, and also I saw... I can't do a German accent, so I'm not going to bother, but I imagine him loudly interjecting with something to say in this kind of pose. And I'm coming up with the shape of the feathers that I think matches that kind of pose, and I'm decorating his perch to look more like what it does look like in the show, where it has this cool like zigzag pattern and feathers. And my boyfriend here, he's doing a red line, well it's a green line, haha, but he's doing a red line on top just to help me define the shape of these wings a little better and give his input on how I should do it. I always ask for feedback when I'm working on these kinds of things because, quite frankly, my boyfriend's a better artist than I am. I'll link to his stuff in the description. But also because it's good to get a second opinion on what you're doing and how you can improve it and push it. So I'm kind of matching the feathers and wings to my own style and redrawing them so they're in keeping with the overall look of the picture. And I'm adding in some simple colors that I'm going to do in the flash portion of this process. Just using that Jose picture underneath for reference for sizing and colors. And here I'm in Flash, and I'm doing the same thing I've done for the Animal Crossing villagers, where I take the art and I outline it with the vector pencil tool and I fill it in with solid color fills. This way I get really clean edges on all my shapes, same thing I did last week with the other birds. So I'm just repeating that process here, and this is sped up to 7 times the actual speed, in case you were wondering. This is not how fast I actually draw. I wish. So I'm really trying to push the lines out a little further than I did in last week's birds. I drew these after I drew the first 3, and I'm kind of trying to push the shapes a little bit more dramatically while still keeping them looking like a consistent, coherent series of images. But I'm trying to push out the beaks and the wings just a little bit more to make them a little more zany and cartoony. And I actually think these 3 birds are a lot stronger than the first 3, except the cockatoo. She's like my favorite of all 6, and she's like the side character that doesn't even have a name. Well, there's like a bunch of cockatoos, but I didn't give her a specific name. Anyways, so I'm doing the little feather decoration with the beads that's on his little hoop, and I'm keeping Jose's hoop underneath. Actually, you'll see in a minute I delete him. Or rather, I delete his lines here, and then I delete the sketch layer, and I adjust him to fit onto Jose's hoop, because I know I'm just going to use that overall shape. Now I'm using these hoops, or this perch, or whatever you want to call it, not as like a way to cheat, per se, but as a way to keep things looking consistent, and I think any way that you can get the desired result of your artwork while keeping it efficient is a good way to be, and it's not a cheat. So, anyways... So I bring him back into the iPad in Procreate, and I go in and add the lines on top just to define some of those feathers in little areas like that, and the bamboo on the hoop, as you can see. And then here I'm going in and I fix a mistake I actually made where the hoop needs to overlap his tail feathers. I draw that in with a hard round brush carefully to try to match those hard edges. And here I'm doing the shadow layer the same way I've done for the previous birds in Animal Crossing, where I duplicate the layer, make it darker, less saturated, more purple, and I use a mask to paint with black to use as an eraser to paint in the light. And I'm highlighting him using this process. And I also do a highlight layer, which I don't believe I did for any of the birds last week. This crazy hot pink and red overlay is just to give a little more color to the image. Here is the highlight layer on top. I made it like a more bright yellow, as if it's beaming down on him from a spotlight above him inside of the theater. And this adds an extra level of dimension that I didn't actually add to last week's birds, and I think it really makes these 3 stand out from the previous week. And here is the final result of Fritz. Next up is Michael, the Irish host. I can't do an accent, I'm sorry. The Irish host. And I gave him a very friendly kind of appearance, and I wanted to give him a slightly different head shape, just to avoid all these birds looking like recolors of one another, because they are similar in the show. They more or less are the same animatronic body with different feathers and slightly different eyes and, of course, different voices, but I wanted to give them distinct personalities. So I have him kind of giving what I consider to be like a friendly interjection to a conversation. Well, I think that's a lovely idea, you know, again, I'm not going to do an accent, but that was my idea for the pose of Michael here. And I decorate his hoop with those weird little like cork things that are on, as well as little feathers and beads that were on some of the photos I found of his perch. Here I'm adding an overlay, and this is where I came up with the idea. I was like, well, if Jose is the rainbow bird and his background is green, he's kind of like the leader, and I want these other ones to be kind of like red, yellow, and blue. And I'd actually started sketching Pierre first, and I was like, okay, he's going to be blue, Fritz is going to be red, and then Michael I'll make like a yellowy green. So he's the yellow bird. So I kind of pronounce the yellow more in him. And here I'm doing the same thing where I bring him into Flash, outline, and fill with different colors to make it solid. You know the drill by this point, it's been 5 birds of me doing this. But same process. I really wanted to pump up the yellows and the greens again to make him read as he's the yellow one. Yeah, I like the idea of having a red, yellow, blue, and green one as like a matching set of hosts. So anyway, I'm going in and I'm doing the same thing I've done with the other birds, as you can see, highlighting, or rather sketching with the pencil vector tool in Adobe Animate set to smooth, not ink. That's a helpful tip actually, is in the bottom right of your tools panel you'll see there's different options for the pencil tool. There's one that's like straight, one that's smooth, and one that's inking. Inking is a little too freehand and you get a lot of jittery areas. If it's set to smooth, you can get these really crisp, smooth lines without having to fuss around too much. So I always set my tool to smooth, and I get these nice shapes that are easy to modify into like perfect curves. And this is my like cheat for getting perfect shapes and curves, is just putting this tool on smooth and doing shapes like this in Adobe Animate. And again, another thing I love about vector lines, as you can see around that eye area, is I just modified the shape of it a little using the select tool. I just kind of like pushed and pulled and pinched the line a little bit. It's something that, as far as I know, you can't do with raster programs. I mean, there's the liquify tool, but it kind of makes it more smudgy and whatever. Keeping a clean line and just adjusting it ever so slightly is a pretty vector specific thing, and I really love that about Adobe Animate. And I know it's an unorthodox way to make art, but in my opinion, there's no incorrect way to make art as long as the final result is what you had in mind. It doesn't really matter what program you use or what tool you use, as long as you get the desired result. And in my case, I get exactly what I'm looking for by using Adobe Animate in this way. So here he's back in Procreate, and again, how I get my images into Procreate is I save them to my Dropbox folder as a transparent PNG from Adobe Animate, and then in Procreate I insert file, and that'll open up my Dropbox, and I can just tap on the file and it brings it right into the workspace. So I'm doing the shadows the same way, where I take the colors and I duplicate the flat colors, make them less saturated, darker, and more purple, and then I tap the layer, hit mask, and use a black paintbrush to paint in the light, the same way as I have for the other birds. I do the same process with the highlight layer, where I duplicate the flat color layer, make it lighter, brighter, and yellow, and then I just remove what I don't need. And I'm doing another series of yellow overlays to get the final result of Michael, the yellow host, the Irish host. Last but not least, we have Pierre. He's our final host. He's the French host, of course, based on the name. It should be easy to tell. And I'm not going to elaborate too much on the process here because you've seen it now twice, but I wanted him to look very kind of suave, and there was some cool photos of his animatronic where his eye is kind of half-lidded, and it gives him this unique personality that's a little different from the more upbeat-looking animatronics you see at Disney parks. So I wanted to give him a sassy look, and here you can see the red line suggestions from my boyfriend of how to move that arm up, and I agree with him. I'm like, yeah, it should be higher up, so I kind of do my own thing where I adjust what he drew in with the red lines and make it my own style here, and kind of touch up his face and make sure all the shapes are exactly what I want. Yeah, I really love the vintage Disneyland aesthetic and style of stuff, especially, you know, Disneyland has it in spades more so than Disney World. Like, Disney World I still think is better because there's just more stuff to do, but, you know, Disneyland has that unique charm to it that no other theme park in the world has, and especially, like, Adventureland and the Tiki Room and Jungle Cruise and stuff like that. I will say Tarzan's Treehouse and Swiss Family Robinson Treehouse really sucks, and they should probably tear those down and, like, replace them with a churro stand or something, but I know somebody will want my head for that. Somebody loves climbing stairs at a theme park, but it's not me, you know? I don't get it, personally. Anyways, I'm continuing to draw the little accessories that are on Pierre's stand here, including the little shells. I think I'd seen some photos where he had like a whole bunch of like puka shells almost, like, you know, those puka shell necklaces dangling from it, but I simplified it into just a few seashells because it's more in keeping with this simple aesthetic that I have going for these, and it's just easier to read rather than having to like zoom in and look at all these little tiny shells. I don't think all that level of detail is necessary for these pieces. I really like the eye on Pierre here. I know it's just modeled after the reference, but I think that's why I like it the most, is it's modeled after the animatronic reference more so than the other two in this set, and more so than the other three in the previous series. Just cleaning up those little areas. Sometimes, like, I'll set the fill to close small gaps just to make things faster, but then I end up having to fix these little tiny areas later anyways, so I should probably just set it to not close gaps and just fix the gaps in the first place to save time. Lesson to myself. Anyhow, I'm just adjusting this so that it fits the hoop underneath, which is Jose's hoop perch thing. Fitting these little like string areas and shells so that they're in line with the hoop underneath from the previous artwork. So I've saved him, I'm bringing him back into Procreate, and yeah, just repeating the same process with the shadows and the highlights as I did on the other two birds. Defining some of the lines on the feathers to make them stand out, and I'm actually really happy with this one. Like, I don't know what my favorite is of these three, because I'm actually really happy with these three compared to last week's. I think they're actually better, not only because of the highlight layer, but I think I pushed the personalities a little more. I think I did more with the lines. Like, I'm just getting better at this way of doing art the more I do it, especially with the Animal Crossing villagers. They give me a lot of practice doing this kind of style, so yeah. I do a quick blue overlay and make him look extra blue and wonderful. So here are the three final pieces. I'm actually really happy with these, and I think they're better than last week's, quite honestly. So I think these ones actually turned out better than the ones from last week, and I think it's because I'm expanding on this technique of like doing the sketch in Procreate and then doing the solid color fills in Animate and then bringing it back into Procreate and doing all the shadow and highlight stuff. The more I do it, the better I get at that technique. I had never done it prior to the Animal Crossing villager, so I'm really liking this kind of look for my work, and I hope to expand upon it, and I hope to do more Disney fan art in particular. So if you have any suggestions of Disney theme park fan art that you think is a niche that needs to be filled, like nobody's ever done fan art of this thing that's in this attraction hidden behind a wall that like only theme park people know about, definitely leave those kinds of suggestions in the comments. I would love to do some like nerdy theme park fan art. Be sure to subscribe if you'd like to see more art from me. I'll be trying to do speed paints every week. By the time this video goes up, I'll be on the beach somewhere in Spain, so there might be a week or two where you don't see a video from me because I'm overseas. But after that, I hope to be posting at least once a week a speed paint video or a tutorial or something helpful. Thank you for watching, and have a very fantastic and magical day.